your flesh and blood.
Welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and it is always, I say this every time, I mean it. I swear I mean it. It's so nice to have you with us to join in this conversation, at least from the listening end. If you want to join in the conversation with our guests, then you need to go to richarddugan.com and you need to click on the link to our guest's website and contact them, and then you will be able to carry on a conversation with them to find out more about what it is that they do. But right now, I want to tell you that Tell Me Your Story is here on Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., streaming live at those times at richarddugan.com. And we are also podcasting on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, and, well, you know, there are many more websites than I could list here. It would take the rest of the show. We're also on YouTube, where you can listen to and watch these interviews. And I hope, whether it's the podcast or the video cast, that you select notification. Although I don't know that you can do that without subscribing, and it's okay. I'm not in this for the numbers, even though I mention them on a regular basis. We're almost at 100,000 listens on the podcast end over the analytics of SoundCloud. Again, that's since 2018, January 1. And I think it's great. And I'm so happy that we're, increasing. That means more people are listening. And that is the point. I may only have 121 subscribers on, or followers, maybe it is, on YouTube. But again, there are a lot more people who aren't subscribing, who are watching the videos. And again, I am very grateful that they are doing that. And if it's you, I thank you. With that, I also want to mention, if you'd like to support the work that we are doing, we would be grateful for any financial support. We have a PayPal account. It is there for your security as well as ours. And when you go there, they'll ask you for an email address. It happens to be richard@richarddugan.com, to whom you will be sending that support. And thank you for those who have and for those who will. And then we ask that you spend time going within and listening to that still small voice, following the promptings, listening for the inspiration, the encouragement, and maybe even the insight. And we hope that you will take time to do that. With all of that being said, now we are going to turn to our very special guest, Art GISER. Art's unique background. He's creator of Energetic, I think Energetic, that's right, NLP trainer. He's a medical researcher, healer, intuitive. He's a leader, a team specialist for major corporations. He's got 4 decades under his belt studying psychic development, plus energetic and spiritual healing. He has been blessed to receive 2 empowerments during, I should say directly from the Dalai Lama. There's a man I would love to meet, from Tibet, and including one to increase his ability to heal others. Art GISER, thank you so much for being with us here on the program. I'm thrilled to have you here. I would shake your hand, and then I'm one step closer to the Dalai Lama.
Well, I'm thrilled to be here. I've been listening. I'm a new fan of your podcast, and I really like your guests and your energy around the podcast. So I'm thrilled to be here.
I am thrilled as well. I'm glad to be here as well. And I one of the things that I talk about, and we use a slogan, giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. And of course, you and I, we're here right now. Interestingly enough, if you really looked at it, you and I are here because of all of the choices that we have made, even those as a kid. Can you believe that? Even those as a child have brought you and I together. And when I think about that, it's like, wow. I mean, I don't want to put too fine a point on it, but who knows what choice I could have made way back when that you and I would have never met. I wouldn't be doing these programs, et cetera, et cetera. I find the universe works in incredible, incredible ways. And you have found some incredible ways with all of these accolades here. I'm going to start in the space where I normally get to the end of the program going, oh, I wish we had talked about this. I want to talk about this aspect of intuition. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the things we talk to people about is going within during the decade of perfect vision and listening to that still small voice, and sometimes just being quiet. Share with us your introduction to and your experiences of as you have grown and evolved in your humanness and in your spirituality.
so my experiences around intuition.
Yes, intuition and your intuitive abilities that you use in your work, in your vocation, if you will.
Well, often people will ask me, "Oh, did you have all these intuitive abilities when you were young?" And by the way, you know this, but everybody has incredible intuitive abilities.
Mm-hmm.
I used to actually be afraid to develop my psychic abilities and my energy abilities because, the old idea when we were young is that only a few special people have these abilities. Afraid I wouldn't be one. And so I wouldn't even try it. But in spite of that, things would just happen. We've all had experiences where you just knew things. There was no way you could know them. And when it was absolutely real to me, my first year in college, and I was a person, I don't think I was ever depressed as a kid. And my first year of college, different things happened that really challenged my identity and who I thought I was. And I was going to the University of California, Santa Cruz, which is a beautiful, beautiful school in the hills above the Monterey Bay in California. But at the time, I didn't have a car. There weren't any buses. We had like 60 inches of rain up in the hills. And I'm living in a dorm, and people are getting really depressed. And even if I woke up in a good mood, I was around people that were depressed. And I would go to the study rooms in the library, and I'd be studying. And all of a sudden, you know how like when a doctor hits your knee and your leg just moves?
Oh, so yeah, that little rubber mallet.
Yeah. And, when you're in college, either you're studying or you're checking people out. And
okay, yeah.
So I'm reading, and all of a sudden my head would go, and my head would spin around, and I would always be staring right into somebody's eyes, and they wouldn't have time to move, to change their gaze. And so they would jump, I would jump, and it would happen like over and over again. In fact, I stopped going for a while because it was freaking other people out and freaking me out. So it was absolutely clear to me then that everything I believed was true, that we are all interconnected and we all can pick these things up, because this would happen with people behind me. So it wasn't like there was peripheral vision involved. And then I didn't do much with psychic development until I started studying NLP, the neuro-linguistic programming. And people in the program, this was in Marin County, which is just north of San Francisco. And in Marin County, if you throw a rock, you hit a psychic, a therapist, a coach, a body worker, yogi. And so people in the program started teaching me about energy work and introducing me to teachers. And the time that I realized who I was, one of these special people, is I was introduced to this teacher, and I went to his workshop. And at the end of the workshop, we had to pair up, and we each wrote a question on a piece of paper, folded it up, and the other person had to hold it and answer the person's question. And so we're all like nervous and freaked out. So I did it. And when I just had to say what was coming into my mind. And when I was done, my partner, who is a man, I only knew him from the workshop, I didn't know him very well. He said, I actually wrote 2 questions and you answered them in order. Now he's really nervous. He turns around, not only answers my question, but described what was going on in my life so well that I started using his description. I would talk to people because it was better than my own. So here I am one of these special people. But then as I studied more and as I began to teach, I realized that everybody's one of these special people, that we all have these phenomenal intuitive abilities to know things that there's no possible way to know. So I'm not sure it's your question, but
well, it certainly is a good beginning for us here on the program, because again, we're I don't have all the answers, and I know you would agree that you don't have all the answers either. But what we do have is an opportunity here to learn from one another, and that's kind of what this program is all about, is sharing our insights and perspectives. Intuition is a big one that I have been working on and with, so to speak. I've had some very interesting experiences myself where I was bicycling until I was 38 years of age, only because I didn't see well enough. I was legally blind. And so I was bicycling all over Phoenix. Now, this is before Phoenix exploded. and then I left. But be that as it may, I was traveling from home to work, and it was about a 6 or 7 mile bike ride each way. But it was way out west where there were at that time farmland, and they were fields, I should say, that were about a mile square. So every time you crossed an intersection, you'd gone a mile. And I traveled at 4, 5, 6, whatever, how many miles it was. And I got to this one place where I was bicycling, and this impression says, turn right at the next street. And I'm thinking, why the hell would I do that? That takes me 3 miles out of my way. And I said, I'm not going to do that. And I passed the intersection, and the prompting, go back and turn left at that last street. I mean, you got to be kidding me. And finally, it would not let up. So I finally made the choice. Now, bear in mind, this is something that I think people need to understand, and maybe we can talk a little bit about this as well. Just because you are getting these promptings does not mean you have to choose them. However, I will tell you from personal experience that when you don't, life tends to take a whole different slant. And I've had those as well. But this one was, I actually was a half a mile past that street. I turned around and I made the left, and then another left, and then another left. And then I made a right back onto the same street that I was already on, only now I'm a mile further down that street, and went on to work. Now, I don't know what the deal was, if I avoided something, or if like, that proverbial story about, the butterfly effect kind of thing. Or was it the universe, the divine, testing me, saying, are you serious? Do you really mean what you say you're going to listen to and follow the promptings? Which, by the way, I wrote down on a real wide white piece of construction paper in a personal growth program. In print letters, I said, I will listen to, I stand corrected. In cursive, I wrote, I will listen to, and then in big block letters, and follow the promptings of my friend. That's how I refer. Do you think that doing so, listening to that still small voice, listening to the divine, whatever you want to call it, in that level of intuition, is I don't know if I want to say the best way to go, the right way to go? Give me your gauge on that. How do you feel about that in terms of living one's life and still, hey, saying I still have a choice and I'm choosing to listen and follow?
Well, I love that you're starting with that, because that's what I teach too, is you don't have to follow your intuition. And what makes it a little bit tricky is starting to recognize what's your intuition versus what's just thoughts or somebody else's thoughts, because we pick up thoughts from other people, and people can begin to recognize what's their authentic intuition. So for me, usually my most authentic intuition, I tend to hear it. Some people are more clairvoyant, more clairaudient. We can all do all of them, but I get a lot of my best information. I call it the executive summaries. Like a voice just goes dum 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 dum. And I've learned that that's always accurate, and so I do follow that. Other times, thoughts come in, and I have to go, okay, is this a true intuition, or is it just a thought from my unconscious? Is it somebody else's thought that I'm picking up through the telepathic channels? And they'll be, if people start paying attention to their intuitions, they'll tend to have qualities. If it's a feeling, it'll have certain qualities. So for me, it's usually very neutral. It's not like, I'll give you I don't know if it's a funny example, but one time I live both in the Hollywood Hills of California and in San Francisco. And I had parked my car in San Francisco. I was going to go see a friend. And all of a sudden, I just got this sense that I should, something wasn't safe. And there was nobody around. And I actually ran to my friend's apartment, but I did it like I was just kind of jogging, so like it was running from something. And I visited my friend. And when I came back, there were policemen around my car. And I walked up, and one of them goes, "Is this your car?" And I went, "Yes." And he goes, "Would you mind leaving it for a little while? Because it's marking where the bullets were." And I went,
Uh,
I go, fine. Yeah. How much time do you need? And he goes, only about 10 minutes. I go, yeah, whatever time you need. But when I'd gotten out of the car, it was a neighborhood I was familiar with. There was nobody around, but there was just this sense of not being safe. And there've been numerous times when I've had those kind of warnings, but they don't come in like, oh, for me, it comes in really calm.
mm-hmm.
I remember when I was first integrating intuition into my NLP work, the neuro linguistic programming, I was teaching this program, and I didn't realize that people in this program were really open to intuition, because I was brought there to do an NLP program. And I knew this woman had a block, some kind of unconscious belief that was interfering with her health, but it was so suppressed, she couldn't get to it consciously. So I just started looking at her energy, and I was told, like, well, both of her parents have cancer, so she thinks she's going to get cancer, but she's not. This voice just came in like again, executive summary. So then I'm thinking, well, I'm not supposed to know this. So I thought, what can I do? And I just went to her and I went, well, there's a lot of beliefs that could be, like, for instance, my father died when he was 45. And for a long time, I had a belief that I would die young. And then I changed that belief, and I don't believe that anymore. And this was years ago now, of course. And she goes, well, that's really funny, because both of my parents have cancer, and I've always believed I'd get cancer. So it was kind of, this absolute validation that what I was getting was correct. So what I'm saying for people, you can start testing your intuition, not testing it like you're giving it a test. But when you get thoughts, like you're saying, if you get to turn right, turn right. And you may never know why, but other times you'll start noticing what's accurate, and there'll be a way that it sees or hears or feels to you when you're getting your really accurate intuitions.
We are talking with Art GISER, and we're talking about the work that he does through his website, which we're going to give you right now, because you need to know where to find this information. It's not enough to give you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true if we don't give you the information that helps to support that. And that website is blockbuster7.com. That's blockbuster7.com. And guess what, folks? You are listening to Tell Me Your Story. Well, I'm Richard Dugan, and you are listening to a program that is going to dive into a lot of different things that we hope that you will be a part of. We hope that you will participate in, and so forth. Blockbuster7.com. Blockbuster. Now, we all know about the video store that used to exist. What's the Blockbuster 7 all about?
When people sign up for that, and it's free, when they go to that page, they get 4 videos over 4 days that take them through very, very powerful energetic NLP processes where they'll clear unconscious and energetic blocks to their success and happiness. They'll learn how to clear other people's energy out of their energy field. And even more importantly, they'll learn how to clear what in them is allowing that energy. So people all the time are going, oh, somebody else's energy is in my energy field, or an energy vampire stole my energy. And I understand why people see it that way. What I was taught and what I believe is everybody's the sovereign of their energy field. Everybody is the sovereign of their energy field. So if somebody's energy is stuck in your energy field, it has to hook into something of yours. And there's a lot to hook into. There's karma, there's spiritual contracts, there's conscious beliefs, unconscious programming, energetic programming. And so in Blockbuster, people learn how to start clearing what in them allows other people's energy to stay stuck in their energy field. And most people would be horrified to realize how much of other people's energy is in their energy field. I mean, most of the energy in people's energy fields isn't their energy. And what happens is you're getting their emotions, you're getting their thoughts, you're getting their do's, their don'ts, their rules. And the more you clear other people's energy, the more you can embody more of your authentic essence. And by the way, all of this is really easy, and the videos take you through it. And through the videos, people learn how to do it for themselves, and they they have ongoing access to the video so they can use them whenever they want. But one thing there's this idea of when you present things to people, sometimes you need to present it in the way they think of it rather than the way that you do.
Mm-hmm.
So I call it blockbuster. That's not exactly the way I think about it. I believe in the idea that all our blocks were there for some kind of purpose. So it's more about healing them than busting them. And I'm certainly no expert in this, but in my understanding of Hinduism, they talk about the elephant-headed god, Ganesh, who's he's the remover of obstacles. So I don't personally think of it as an elephant-headed god, but I think of it as a consciousness and an energy. But what I found out later was that Ganesh is also supposed to be the one who puts the blocks there for your spiritual growth. Mm-hmm. So he both there and removes them. So in energetic NLP, we embrace the idea from Taoism that what's in the way is the way. What's in the way is the way. So rather than thinking, oh, what's wrong with me? I'm blocked. We're going, okay, the blocks are there because they serve some kind of purpose, maybe in a past life, maybe in childhood, but now we're ready to clear them, heal them, and replace them with information and wisdom and concepts from our spirit. So
go ahead.
The program takes people through how to do that. And I want to let people know it's easy and it's fun. I don't believe there's a lot of spiritual systems that are about hard work and thinking hard and analyzing. And that's great. Energetic NLP isn't one of them. We're about connecting into playfulness, into the amazing, miraculous abilities in everyone.
You know, that is an interesting perspective to take. And I will agree with you on it wholeheartedly, because I think that one of the sayings or things that I've heard is that what makes us who we are is not what we go through, but how we, I'm going to use the word respond, because I always want to use the word how we react, but react has to do with the past stuff that causes us to respond to a particular scenario in the present, the same way we always have throughout our lives. But what you are talking about is responding or acting, not reacting, to these various events in our lives. That is what makes us who we are, is how we respond to these things, or act, if you will, with a new mindset. And that, I think that's kind of what little I know of NLP is kind of what that is talking about. And to that end, we're going to talk more about that as we continue here with Art GISER here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and it is truly a pleasure to have our very special guest here on the program to talk about what it is that we are focusing on. NLP, tell me a little bit about what that is. I know that the initials are neuro-linguistic programming. I get that part. But what does it mean to the layman, and what does it mean if, in your case, because you're talking about energetic NLP, it's something a little, you've added a little something to it, a little spice to it. Give us that definition, and then expand on that from your experience.
Well, and thanks for saying that, because energetic NLP is different than standard NLP. Standard NLP is one component of energetic NLP, but NLP, and I've been a trainer in NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, since 1985. I studied with all developers of, I know, I can't believe it myself. When I hear somebody's been doing something for 30, 40 years, I go, wow. Now it's like, when did that happen? But I studied with all the developers of NLP. One of them became my primary mentor, a woman named Leslie Cameron Bandler. And NLP was developed in the 70s in California. Interestingly, I mentioned being at the University of California, Santa Cruz. That's where it started, but it started a couple of years after I left, which I always thought was kind of interesting. But But the people who started NLP were interested in how do some therapists get really rapid results. The standard idea in psychology back then was that therapy took 5 to 12 years. It was all about insight. If you knew why you got the way you were, you would eventually heal it. And there's an old Woody Allen movie where he goes, I've only been in therapy for 12 years. And I'm not saying that they didn't help people, but it was a really long process. And often they weren't able to help people. But there were a few therapists who got really magical, rapid results with people. So the people who started NLP started studying them, videotaping them. And this was when, a videotape wasn't like an iPhone. It was like it was this thing like half the size of a refrigerator. And that was the birth of NLP. And one of the insights in NLP was, and we do deal with the past in NLP, but they went, what's really more important is not how did you get the way that you are, but how do you keep creating it? So if you have low self-esteem, you have to keep recreating it all the time. Your mind has to recreate it. Mm-hmm. So no matter how you got there, how are you creating it? And so with NLP, sometimes you can get incredibly miraculous, rapid, deep changes. I mean, I've worked with people and changed phobias in one session and things that weren't supposed to be possible and a lot of quite amazing things. But as I mentioned before, when I'm studying NLP, I also started studying energy work, psychic development, and spiritual principles. And I realized you could do magic with NLP. You could do magic with spiritual principles. You could do magic with transformative and healing energy work. And they all had different strengths and weaknesses. So at first I kind of kept them separate. And then I started weaving them together. And I realized it was like 1 + 1 + 1 = 1,000. So that was the birth of energetic NLP. So energetic NLP has NLP, spiritual principles, healing and transformative energy work, intuition development, and everything's affecting one another. So one of the things I loved about NLP was when I had studied a little bit of psychology before that, the thing that I could never buy was everybody was telling you the truth. This is exactly how things are. And the people in NLP took more of the scientific model that scientists often don't follow, which is that these are just models. These are theories. So a lot of you learned like the atom has a nucleus with little electrons like planets circling it. And then you get further in physics and they go, well, that's not true at all. But that simple little model of the atom allowed people to make incredible advances in science until they went beyond it. So the NLP approach is like these are models and you keep evolving them. So there's a lot of people doing wonderful spiritual and energetic work. But what's really different about energetic NLP is a couple of things. But one is that I make people take a pledge at the beginning that they're not going to believe anything I tell them. I mean, I ham it up. We do a pledge. I mean, they're giggling by the end. And I'll go, I don't believe what I'm telling you. This is what I think. I'm not walking down with the tablets from Mount Sinai, the way I perceive chakras. And, we need to have models of things. But there's all kinds of different beliefs around chakras. Are there 7? Are there 15? Are there 144? I believe there's a number of them above your head, a number of them in your head, lots of them in your body. There's some below your feet, in your energy field. And, in Eastern traditions, typically they said they were in a channel by your spine and they were facing up and they had petals like a lotus flower. Mm-hmm. They do great work with that. And then a lot of Western people went, oh, no, they're like little vortexes that come out front and back, which is a completely different model. But when I look at somebody's chakras, they don't look like either of those. They're like dynamic, multidimensional fields of energy. And that's a little hard to work with. So in energetic NLP, we move between the different models and we play with them. We just don't think they're right. Yeah. And where I think a lot of people get stuck, in my personal opinion, is they believe what they're saying is some kind of absolute truth. And it's very innocent, but to me, it's spiritual arrogance. Mm. I don't care how involved you are spiritually, it's always coming through you, and it's always Well, the last thing I'll say on that, there's I forget if it's from Hinduism or Buddhism, but there's a philosophy that in English they translate as not that, not that. And what it means is there's certain things we don't have words for what they are. We can say what they aren't. So in energetic NLP, we go for more what's called grokking. And I'm sure you're familiar with that. And grokking is you get out of trying to intellectually understand it and you become one with it. You own it.
Mm-hmm.
So you can work with the great mysteries without having to put them in an intellectual box.
Exactly.
So in energetic NLP, we really embrace putting your spirit and inner wisdom in charge and letting go of how you think it works.
Energetic NLP is the subject. Art GISER's my guest, and you are listening to Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host. And Art, you've brought up a word that when I first heard it, and I probably first read it, and then I heard it again, was from a book that took me probably 15 years to finally read, because I bought the print version, which was about this thick, okay? This was one thick science fiction novel.
Right.
And then it was made available on Audible. And just as a footnote for you, I have been involved with Audibles long before they were ever Audibles. As a kid growing up, being legally blind, I was listening to recordings for the blind and talking books for the blind. And that's where I read, for the first time, Autobiography of a Yogi, my metaphysical primer. But back to A Stranger in a Strange Land, which is the one that took me 15 years to read because the book was heavy. I had to use a magnifying glass in order to read it. So I'm holding it with one hand. I've got the magnifying glass here and trying to turn the pages and all of that. And it was a mess. So I was so grateful. And then I'm hearing this word grokking. Now, they did define it, but I kind of put it into a finer point. And maybe because you basically said, become one. And my definition of to grok is to assimilate that information, if you will, that knowing into every subatomic particle of your being. And again, as you just said, not on an intellectual level, but aren't we programmed and or designed to process everything intellectually?
Absolutely. That's so important. One of my mentors in NLP, David Gordon, used to say, we're meaning-making machines. We're compelled to make meaning. So what I did, I made up a term, beliefs du jour, like soup du jour. And so I'll go, well, these are my beliefs du jour, and I teach from that. And I go, you always have to have a level of meaning. The best way I can explain this, I used to go to a spiritual center in Brazil, and I would always stay in the same house that a friend of mine owned, and she lived next door. So her cats knew me really well. And the idea that we're here to learn and grow, so I used to meditate. I meditate on things, and I'd meditate and I'd ask, is that why I'm here, to learn and grow? And I'd always hear the same answer, which was, no, but that works for you. That's fine. And then like 6 minutes later, I'd meditate on it again. And I go, am I here to learn and grow? And I'd always hear, no, but that works for you. That's fine. So this went on for a few years. So here I am in Brazil at the house, and people would talk about the bubble. Around this spiritual center, there was like this bubble of energy. So amazing things were happening all the time. And so the house I'm staying at is in the bubble, and I'm sitting there reading some book, and one of the cats is sitting at my feet. And for some reason, I thought of this again. So I stopped reading and I went, am I here to learn and grow? And again, I hear, no, but that works for you. And so I said back to the voice, well, then why am I here? And I felt my head, like I felt compelled to look at the cat. Mm-hmm. And what I had is, you could as easily tell that cat while you're reading a book as we could tell you what you're doing here. So learn and grow is fine. So
go ahead.
Saying, for me, yeah, we need to have beliefs, but we don't need to hold on to them. I like say, I listen to people all the time and like, everything's love. And everything's like this absolute truth. Mm-hmm. And it's like, these are great ideas, but play with them. You don't have to make them an absolute truth to work with them.
You know, it's interesting that you use that term absolute truth, because one of my guests and I were chatting, and matter of fact, his name is, I can't remember if he actually changed his name to that. I think he did. Lion Goodman is his name.
Oh, wow.
And we were talking about perspective. We were talking about a lot of the modern day, current events types of things, terms like, I don't know, fake news and alternative facts and those kinds of things. Well, kind of what you said, you've actually kind of phrased this in a similar way. He said that the only absolute truths that there are those that you personally hold, because that's your perspective. All right. And someone else is going to have another set of absolute truths. And I'm going to bring that down to just perspective. Each one of us has our own perspective. Are we right as far as our observations, or are we wrong? Well, guess what? It's neither right nor wrong. It's just our observation. That's how we see things. My best friend of 53 years, I wish he was still around. He passed away this past May. He and I went through grade school, high school, and college together, traveled to Kansas together. I would meet him at the airport because he worked there at the airport. Back in 2022, I was back there for my sister's memorial, and we chatted at one of the food court tables and so forth. It was really nice, and just had a wonderful time. And I always told him, whenever I finished a conversation on the phone or in person, I say, "Hey, I love you, man," and we would hug and go on our way. And I went to try to cry over his memory the day after I found out that he'd passed away.
Mm.
And I'm sitting in the car going down the mountain where I live, and I just want to cry. I want to cry over his passing. And every time I thought about him, I couldn't do anything but laugh, because we had so much fun together. Certainly, I mean, he at one point in his life, he was homeless, and he called me for help. I didn't have any money, but what I offered him was, look, you already have a network there in Phoenix. Go to some of the people that you know and tell them, look, I just need a place that I can stay in until I get myself back on my feet. And he found one, and he did get himself back up on his feet. In any event, and I know there are others, like, unfortunately, he and his brother had a rift between them, because my best friend was gay. And I remember when my best friend came out to me when we were 17, 18 years old. And when he tells me this, I'm saying, okay, so what do you want me to do with that? You're still my best friend. That doesn't change a thing. You find happiness where you find it. I'll find it where I want to find. If I want to look under a rock, don't pass judgment. Okay. I'll find love under a rock. Okay. So anyway, perspective. People are going to cry over his passing. I talked with his partner. He was very sad, very, very broken up, but he was glad that I was talking to him. He said, "Oh yeah, he talked about you all the time," which was kind of nice. I'm going, well, I hope I wasn't the center of conversation all the time, but it was an extraordinary relationship. With that being said, how do we reach a place where, let's say you and I see something from a different perspectives, at least two different perspectives, and yet we want to come to some form of consensus about what we've observed? Does energetic NLP help in that process from getting us out of our intellect into our, shall we say, our soul and or our intuition?
Yes, and there's a lot in NLP itself about that. So a huge part of NLP is, what are the beliefs, the presuppositions that we operate out of, is perspective. And some of those are conscious, a lot of them are unconscious. And most of them we don't even think to challenge. A lot of like bigotry is somebody operating out of presuppositions, perspectives that they don't even think to challenge. They're often some of the nicest people in the world on one level, can be horrible bigots. So the first thing in NLP is to go deeper under each perspective. So under each perspective, there'll be like, what's important about that? What's that perspective designed to do? And when you go deeper, you can usually get to a level where you can find agreement. You can also do this energetically. You can go, well, let me give a couple of examples. So they used to have this thing called the national tests on TV, and one was the national relationship test. And they pose a question and they go, is it A, B, C, or D? And you were supposed to guess. And one was something like, according to experts, when people are fighting in a relationship, how often is it that what they're fighting about isn't really what they're fighting about, isn't really the problem? And I think the right answer was 25%. And everybody I knew was going, that seems low. So if you're fighting about who's taking out the garbage, usually that's not the fundamental issue. So in NLP, we teach people to go deeper. So, well, let me give a tangible example with the abortion issues, and I'm not taking a side right now as I'm describing. One side, people are going, well, we're pro-life, and the other side, we're going, we're pro-choice. At that level, it's complete conflict. And what isn't happening enough is for the pro-choice people to be going to the pro-life people like, I really appreciate that you're concerned about human life, but we're disagreeing about when that starts. And the pro-life people going, we honor that a woman should have control over her body, but we're disagreeing about where it is. When you find the level which you can agree, where you can go like, well, we both honor human life. We both want women to have choices in their life. When you start building those foundations, then you can start working your way up and trying to find, are there solutions that you both can do?
Yeah. I could go ahead.
Out of the argument.
Yeah.
You can act where you respect one another.
Yeah, that's important to maintain that level of respect. Look, you're a human. My brother and I, we're off at opposite ends of the political spectrum, for example. So what? He's still my brother. I still love the guy. And I'm happy that he has achieved the things that he has. He's 2 years younger than me. He is already retired from Disney, where he worked for I don't know how many decades. And he's now living half his life, half his years, or half a year in Vietnam. And because he's got a girlfriend over there, I guess. And then the other half here in the States. But to your conversation about your discussion about the subject of pro-choice versus pro-life, there are two things that strike me when we talk about a woman's right to choose. It's her right to do with her body what she chooses, right? Well, I would throw this out not so much as an argument in either direction, but as something for people to consider. All right. I can appreciate your position about, the fact that this is a human life. But to me, in order to determine when life begins, shouldn't we figure out when life ends? What's the criterion for calling it? I'm calling it at, 9:22 a.m. on this date. This person is dead. All right. So what's the criteria for dead? And if we can define what the criteria for dead is, I think we come closer to figuring out when life starts. Then there's the other, I'll call it dichotomy, where we as Americans, we have individual rights of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, among others. First Amendment rights as an individual. Okay, I get you. But until we define when life begins, and we need to do that, then we need to recognize and respect that individual who just so happens to be a female, her right of individuality, because you got to choose whether or not you wore a mask during the pandemic for whatever the reasons you chose not to. You said the government's lying to us, and others are saying, I just want to be safe. And I used to tell people who complained about the government taking away their First Amendment rights, I'm going, are you kidding me? I'm exercising my First Amendment rights, incorporating the line from the documents that this country was founded on, of preserving promoting the general welfare and preserving, let's see, how's it go? Preserving the liberty to ourselves and our posterity. I'm wearing the mask because I want to be safe, and I don't want to, if I've got it, give it to anybody else. So nobody's taking any rights away from me. Now, that's my perspective. So those are the two, shall we say, elements to throw into the conversation. And again, they're not elements to force someone to take a side. It's to hopefully get them to say, well, maybe I need to rethink my position. I may end up at the same place. That's okay. I'm not passing judgment if you're still in the same place after considering these. But shouldn't you? What are your thoughts on bringing up those kinds of counterbalances, if you will, or counterweights to a discussion about whatever the subject is?
Well, let me give a sort of a kind of a tactical answer first. There's something in NLP they call a matching that really helps these discussions. And matching is where you start using the language the other person is using. And people can look up matching in NLP if they want. And when you're having an argument with somebody, if you start using some of their language and they start using some of yours, it usually turns into a discussion. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of a technical level. And I really like what you said about, looking, well, what is death? And a lot of spiritual traditions have, as part of their tradition, when the soul enters the fetus. Mm. And a lot of them, it is not for a while,
Yeah.
So that discussion of what's death and if death is when the spirit and the soul leave, then the other question is, well, when does it come? When does it end?
When does it enter? Yeah.
But I think it was Niels Bohr, one of the great quantum physicists, who said, something's a deep truth because the opposite is also likely to be true.
Uh-huh.
And like in the discussion about mass on one, or the whole thing about individual liberties. Mm-hmm. So liberties are important, but being in a community and taking care of other people is also important. So what's the balance? And it comes back to what I was saying about how in NLP and energetic NLP, we have ideas and beliefs, but we don't hold them as ultimate truths. So people, the way most people think, it's either liberty or it's community, or, rather than going, they're both important. How do we bring them together?
Yeah, both and.
We live in this, yeah, exactly. And we live in this kind of polarization and demonization. So I'm saying this to somebody, all four of my grandparents were immigrants. I mean, they were legal, but they were all immigrants. And I'll hear some people go, well, everybody who's concerned about immigration is a racist. And I go, some of them are racist. A lot of them like the culture the way it is, and they don't want the culture to change. That doesn't mean they're a racist necessarily. So, I mean, I don't agree with those people's views on immigration, but I can talk to them and go, I understand that you like the culture the way it is. You don't want it to change. I get that. And I have sympathy for you. I don't agree with you on this issue, but and that's what I mean about going deeper. I can go, I understand people, if you like something, you don't want it to change. That's human nature. And this constant demonization, because people are keeping things at this higher level. And going back to what you were talking about before, we have to have beliefs and meaning. So mm-hmm. Everybody, if you want a wall, you're a racist. And if you don't want a wall, you're doing replacement. Those are, pardon my language, bullshit meanings put on top of these things for 99% of the time. So in NLP and energetic NLP, we encourage people to go, well, what does their behavior, their statements mean to them? What do yours mean to you? And can you talk about that mm-hmm. and deeper? The more people do that, the more they can build back up. And even if they don't reach a total agreement, they get out of it being a fight. It becomes a conversation and creates the atmosphere where you can. Well, let me just add one more thing. something you're probably familiar with called dialogue. And dialogue is different than conversation or debate. In dialogue, whoever's speaking gets to say whatever's on their mind, and everybody else is supposed to fully listen. And when it's your turn, you fully express and everybody else fully listens. And they've done this in corporate groups and in community groups. And when dialogue starts, particularly for men, for a lot of us find it really messy at first. It's like, what the hell, it doesn't seem to be going anywhere. People really embrace it, that everybody's fully expressing and everybody else is really, really fully listening and trying to really grok the other person. After a while, almost always people solve problems. They end up respecting one another and coming up with pretty good solutions. Yeah. So that's the power of trying to grok the other person, getting out of so if I think about the people that I vehemently politically disagree with, if I demonize them, we have nowhere to go. If I look at and go, what's driving them? What's really matters to them? And letting them know what really matters to me. And you can do this through a very verbal level, but you can also do it energetically. You can learn that. So let somebody's energies, when people are talking, they're putting out not just one energy, a whole group of them. So let's say somebody's angry at me. I can respond to the angry energy, or I can go, what's the energy underneath that? And start connecting with that energy and responding to that energy. And then it changes everything.
Yeah. The conversation that we are having right now is between yours truly, Richard Dugan, and we're talking with Art GISER about energetic NLP on, well, of course, Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and this is fascinating to me because in addition to wanting to find that middle ground, if you will, or that maybe not so much middle ground, but that stable ground in terms of relationship, and it can be at any level, whether it was me and my best friend, me and my mother, me and my wife, me and my coworkers, me and somebody who's just, I just happen to meet on the street and we get to having a conversation, and neither of us is packing. Okay. We're not packing heat, and we're going to keep the heat down. Okay, to hopefully less than a low simmer, where we can actually learn something from each other. I learned an awful lot from my brother, and I can appreciate where he's coming from. I don't know that I would go so far as to say this is the greatest country in the world. Somebody has to be second and third and fourth. And we're going to fall back every so often. What's wrong with giving somebody else the lead every once in a while? Although we tend to do it unconsciously or subconsciously through some of the silly things that we do. Okay. But be that as it may, it's the same thing in life with individuals. I've been doing this for 44 years. Okay. 44 years. I've been interviewing. I've been in broadcasting. I've been doing the stuff I've been doing. And I was taught very early on, there will always be, it says if you're walking up a ladder, there will always be someone above you who's better than you. And there will always be someone who is not as good as you. Okay. And it's like we have got to come to terms with that aspect of humanity, that there's always going to be a country that's better than us and always going to be a country that's worse than us, or a state or a county or a city or a neighborhood. But that also denotes dualism. And I have come to a place, Art, I don't believe in dualism anymore. And you kind of alluded to the reality that there is no dualism earlier in the program, when you talked about the things that happen, and we talked about this in regards to choices, that it's just the way that it is. It's like when you look at the universe through a telescope and you see stuff moving around and crashing and exploding and doing this and that and the other thing. There's no judgment out there. The universe is just doing what the universe does. You go to the microcosmic world, you're looking through, say, an electron microscope at cells and all of this kind of stuff moving around and doing their thing. Similar, quite honestly, from my observation, similar to what the macro universe is doing. No judgment there. Okay. The cancer cells and the regular cells, they don't care. They're just doing what they do. But here on our level, oh my God, the judgment is just unbelievable. I've gotten to the point now where it doesn't matter what the situation is. It just is what it is. It's not a bad, you heard that old Chinese story about the farmer and his son? And the neighbor comes over one day and asks, "Hey, how's it going?" And he says, "Well, my son is out there and he's trying to break this one horse and he fell off and broke his leg." "Oh, that's bad." The farmer says, "Well, that's who's to say whether it's good or bad?" The guy comes back over the next day. So, "How's it going?" So, "Well, my son, he's healing up really well, but they came by here to conscript people for the current war, and he, of course, couldn't go because of his broken leg." "Well, that's good." "Well, who's to say that's good or bad?" says the farmer. Next day, same scenario, only this time it was something that happened. The horse got away. They lost their horse. "Oh, that's bad." Next day, "Oh yeah, my son went out and he found the horse and brought back a whole herd of horses." "Well, that's good." And this story goes on. I mean, you could make this thing go on indefinitely. Who's to say whether what's happening in our lives is good or bad? It's just what happens. NLP and energetic NLP can that help me to further cement that in my mind, or help others to begin to understand the reality that it just is?
Well, yes, and the way I would describe it is everything's interconnected, so nothing's in my mind random. And that we talked earlier about following intuition, and you mentioned how, like, with all those turns and stuff, you don't know what would have happened if you'd have done something differently. And when you follow your intuition, it's important not to like judge it minute by minute. Because sometimes when you follow your intuition, it looks like everything's going to hell,
Mm-hmm.
and something incredible happens. So it's being able to, like you said, just kind of accept that whatever is in that moment is, and then just keep working with it, and that and then real magic can happen. But I do believe everything is interconnected. Years ago, I had this experience spontaneously. I wasn't trying to have it, where, the idea that everything's unfolding perfectly. For 3 days, that was absolutely, I grokked it. Whatever happened, whether I wanted it or not, I just felt like somehow that was perfect. And I would just deal with it. If I didn't like it, I would deal with it, maybe try to change it. But I had total acceptance of everything that happened. And it was amazing. And then after 3 days, it started to fade away. And then years later, I was thinking about it, and I meditated, and I went, why did that go away? That was so amazing. And what I was shown, what I was told was that, what I heard in my mind was, that's where you're going, but you're not ready to be there yet. But we wanted you to know where you're going. So to me, it's, if we believe that we're all spiritually and psychically interconnected, then things aren't random. Well, I'll give you a funny example of that. Once, years ago, I went with a bar that had a Sunday afternoon. It was a place where people come late Sunday afternoon and drink. Real fun place. And I'm talking to some friends, and this guy out of nowhere, I hadn't bumped into him. We hadn't, interacted. He just comes up and starts insulting me. And I'm kind of looking at him, and I realized some of what he's saying, or a lot of it was true about him, not me, but some of it were things that, that when I'm being self-critical, I might think, those things that aren't true, but you think about yourself. So I didn't get mad, but I thought, well, this is kind of fascinating. And I get home and there's a message, and I called this good friend of mine who's very psychic. And she goes, the weirdest thing happened. I was doing it. She's a realtor. She goes, I was doing an open house, and this guy comes in and just starts insulting me. And I realized a lot of what he's saying are things that in my, my down moments, I would say about myself. And I went, what time was it? It was almost exactly the same time. So, when things like that happen, you go, what are the odds of that being a coincidence? And one of the things in energetic NLP, we set the intention to have more and more and more wonderful synchronicities. If I can give you one more funny one.
Mm-hmm.
I believe people's abilities come out more when we're playful. So if my groups get too serious, sometimes I'll sing children's songs. And one of my favorite is Old MacDonald, because I like doing the animal sounds. In the chorus of Old MacDonald is E-I-E-I-O. So I'm walking in London at night with a friend of mine who, she first was a student of mine, then we got to be really good friends. And we're walking at night in London, and this woman's pushing what they call a pram, baby stroller. And the baby's completely quiet. When the baby gets even with us, the baby goes, E-I-E-I-O, and then doesn't say another word. And we're looking at him going like, do we know you? Is this a past life? Or, so I mean, what are the odds? I mean, that is, and there's more significant ones I could give up, but I like that one because it's just so funny. So if a baby in a stroller is giving me a message, how interconnected is the world? So that's the way I look at it.
There's a television series, and I hope I have the correct one, with Kiefer Sutherland. And this really goes to what you're talking about, what we've been talking about. It was a television series with Kiefer Sutherland called, I believe it was called Touch. And what it did was in the first maybe half hour, it laid out 2 or 3, maybe 4 separate, distinct storylines. One of them had Kiefer Sutherland and this young boy, curly-headed boy, who didn't talk, but could communicate in other ways. He could write and so forth. And as the television show progressed, that episode, these 3 or 4 different stories, one at a time, began to intersect on each other. And apparently, I was just reading a little bit about it, and I'm not sure if it was only around for 2 seasons, but I loved that show because of the message that I hope people got. Not just that it was a drama and you had this little kid, you were rooting for the little kid and all that kind of stuff, but because it showed how we are interconnected. Right. And that's what you're talking about, that first of all, there is no randomness. Now, that's not to say that you're not talking about, okay, there's no randomness, so that means that everything that happens to us is predestined. That isn't what you're saying, is it?
I'm not saying it's predestined. I'm saying that we're conspiring with one another on a spiritual level. So that working things out. So whether anything's random or not, who knows? But I think overall our lives are not random, and it's not an accident who we run into, who we don't run into, what people say. When I was teaching in London in May, I was teaching a program called Spiritual Alchemy, and I had spoken at the International NLP conference, and I was taking an Uber to my friends, and it was a long ride, like over an hour. And the first driver showed up, and I went, I think I put the address in wrong. And he checked, and he goes, oh, you did? And he looked unhappy, and I went, is there a problem? And he goes, well, I took the ride because I thought we were going to a different part of London. And I went, hey, my mistake. It's totally cool. Cancel it. I'll tip you anyways. I'll get another Uber driver. And he goes, you don't mind? I go, fine. So I get this other driver. We have this amazing conversation about spirituality. In fact, he was the one who said his mother told him that I raised you to be happy. But so here I'm teaching this program, Spiritual Alchemy. And right before he drops me off, he goes, oh, and my grandmother said I should study spiritual alchemy. Now, what are the odds of that? Out of, I mean, that's normal in my life. It's like everything just matches up so often that so that I believe that on the level of our spirits, we're arranging things. So I don't think it's an accident you and I connected, that right. our spirits agreed to this. So I don't think it's predestined. And our spirits are working within the context of the greater spiritual influences. So to me, everything's coordinated. Maybe that's the word I would say. But are things some random? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it's to me fascinating to think about. But how about this one? I'm going to throw this in there to really mess mess around here. I went through a personal growth program many years. Well, I'm talking 30 and 40 years ago. I went through LifeSpring, which was an outgrowth of EST back in 1981.
Wow.
And I believe it was stated in that program that I went through that there were people grumbling, and they would, when they were sort of being supported and facilitated, all right, they wanted to know why. Okay, why this, why that, why the other? And so the facilitator would ask this question of them. If you knew the reason why, how would that change your life right now? For example, why am I here? Okay, if I knew the reason why, how would that change my life? Well, interestingly enough, because I've been following the promptings, and I followed my father's advice, which I think was also divinely given. Richard, find a job you love doing because you're going to be doing it for the long time. Don't get stuck like me. Well, I was fortunate that I was following, even if it wasn't consciously, that intuition. And boom, in 1979, August 29th, I was hired by Sun Sounds Radio Reading Service, and that was where I began my official career in this business. And I have felt ever since that I have been in the right place at the right time. Whenever I get, and thank goodness it hasn't happened in many decades, but early on, when I'd get a little too big for my britches, the universe had a way of whittling me down, okay? And in a beautiful way, quite honestly. So I find that it's just one of those things where if you can give up the need to know why, says the facilitator, your life is going to be that much more peaceful, if you will, more, you're going to be more content, not necessarily happy versus sad, but you're going to be living at a level where it doesn't matter. You don't need to know why. You just do it. I had a financial decision I had to make, and I had this plan. And I'm getting this prompting to do something totally contrary to my plan. No. And I finally acquiesced, as I did in that earlier example. 2 days later, had I not followed the promptings, things would have been a lot worse financially for me and my wife. So it wasn't a question of, well, why are you asking me to do this? It's more, I'm either going to do it or am I not? Am I going to argue with you? No. Okay, I'll do it. It's kind of the way it happens sometimes too, isn't it? Where we get bombarded by a spiritual 2x4, and finally we kind of give in. Now some would say, well, yeah, but was that really your choice, or were you coerced? No, I could have still said no. Is that part of the problem we have right now, is that people don't know how to say no, not so much to the intuition, not so much to the voice, but to other people who want us to do other things?
Well, that's it's funny. I just saw an article about that yesterday. I think and a lot of very successful people talk about one of the keys to success is being able to say no. It's also, but again, it's one of those. The opposite is also true. You need to be able to say yes. You need to be able to say no.
Mm-hmm.
I like what you were saying about what they taught in LifeSpring about you don't have to know why, just, you just flow with it. The thing I would add to that is at times it can be useful to meditate on it and go, is there a message for me? Because sometimes, like I've had people not attend workshops of mine sometimes because something would come up that would make it hard. Mm-hmm. And very often that's actually a sign that you should come. So before I first studied NLP, and NLP, this workshop transformed my life. And I mean, in a way that I can't even imagine what my life would have been like if I hadn't gone to it. And there were other NLP workshops wouldn't have done what this one did. And I had no business being there. It was complete. It was a super advanced program and I didn't know anything. The day before, I sprained my ankle and probably actually fractured some bones. and I didn't have time to go to the doctor. I had to borrow crutches. There was no Uber or Lyft. I had to take buses and taxis, which is expensive and a big deal. And a lot of people would have gone, oh, I guess I shouldn't go. But to me, it was clear, like, this was just resistance coming up. Part of the unconscious mind will try to block change, and was trying to block it because it was going to be an enormous change. So I think it is both important to be able to, we don't need to know why and just, flow with things. And it's also very useful at times to meditate and go, I'll give you a funny example. So my full name is Arthur. And if people are listening to this who are from Europe, because they don't do this in the US, if your name's Arthur, people call you Art, like William and Will. Mm-hmm. And so Art and Arthur are not common names. And this has happened to me twice. I'll be channel surfing and I'll get to a channel, Arthur, Art, Arthur, Art. 9, 10 times. And it's kind of like, okay. So each time I meditate on it, like, you got my attention. What's the message? The message was, we're just reminding you life is magical. We're just reminding you. That's all.
Yeah, it's funny because I had a friend back in grade school, I think, and even into high school. And his name, he went by Ricky Eckleberry. And many people will ask me, so Richard, do you prefer Richard, Rich, Rick, Dick? I said, no, Richard's just fine. Or you can call me Dr. D. Now, that was something that was given to me. I have no papers to back that up. It is just a term that I was given because some of the work that I do, I consider myself an audio physician. I'm an archivalist. As a matter of fact, if I could spin the camera around, I would show you a reel-to-reel that's just to my left, where I'm transferring audio going back some 40 years, my friend, that I'm transferring to the computer so that I'm going to post it up online and maybe even use some of the elements into one of these programs called Tell Me Your Story. But it's just amazing. I went through another program in the 90s called Delta Vector, and then they changed it to Omega Vector. And the founder, his name was George Adair, not the famous philosopher. He was a printer. He had a print shop called Papago Printing in Phoenix, Arizona. And he ran these programs for free. You gave whatever you felt it was worth to you or what you could afford and so forth. And I went through the first time I went with my first wife, who was totally blind, and she wanted to go. I can't even remember how she found out about it, but she wanted to go, but she needed somebody to be her guide person. And of course, being her husband, I said, well, all right, I'm not going to participate, but I'll go. Yeah, that doesn't work that way. It's one of those other things too, where they also said when people were complaining about on the first night about being there, I don't want to be here. I wish I was doing this, that, or the other thing. And of course, the facilitator says, for those of you who are complaining about being here, I want to let you in on a little secret. If you did not want to be here, you would be. But guess where you are? And so you're here, and you either stay here and deal with it, or certainly there's the door. Nobody left. Yeah. And the complaining, of course, it stopped. But I was there and I'm going, oh, okay. I feel like I got sucked in. But then again, how do I know that the universe or fellow humans didn't conspire with me on a spiritual or a subconscious or unconscious level? And boom, I went through 4, 5, and 6 of those programs, and God, did I learn a lot. I have most all of the study materials. I've got 2 or 3 notebooks filled, 3-ring binder notebooks filled with material in there that one of these days I'm going to share with folks on this program, starting with the conversation that George, started with, and that was the teachings regarding the 0 point. And then it morphed from there into all kinds of things, and it's just incredible. And it sounds to me like when you first started, Art, you started down one path that took you through all kinds of different modalities that I kind of listed at the front end of the program. What in the world did you ever come to a point where you're going, what the heck was I thinking? This is too much. I need to back off on this stuff because it keeps coming.
Well, for me, I don't know, at a very young age, I was interested in. My father was one of the early computer guys, mainframe computer guys, and so part of me, I wanted to be a scientist when I grew up. I mean, he didn't push me that way. I just loved science. But there's another part of me, even at a really young age, that I knew there were all these powers in the unconscious mind. I just knew it. And there was also psychic abilities. In fact, in elementary school, I'd be hypnotizing friends and cousins. And talks about, I tried to check out a book from on hypnosis from the library, and the librarian wouldn't let me check it out because I was a kid. So my mom checked it out for me. And my mom said, the librarian gave me this, "You're a terrible mother" look. But, and then I went to college and I studied biology. And by the time I was done, I realized that I love science, but being a scientist really wasn't my thing. But I was one of those people, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And like you said earlier, at that time, people told you to have a career for life, like your dad told you, so choose well. So I thought, no, I don't know, maybe I can get a research job while I figure this all out. And I had this belief that something was just going to appear one day. And through a miracle, I actually got this research job because I was barely qualified for it, but they liked me. And I ended up managing a research lab for the University of California Medical School in San Francisco for 11 years. But I knew I didn't really belong there. I mean, I was proud of the work we did. I worked with great people. I mean, everything was fine. It was just, that feeling like, but this isn't really my best use of me. And this isn't really where I'm supposed to be. And finally, I went to a lecture on intuition, which wasn't very good. And they were selling a bunch of books on intuition. And I walked out during a break. And this was in the ancient days when they had bulletin boards with pieces of paper called flyers on them. And for anybody younger. And so I read this flyer and it goes neuro-linguistic programming. And I read the words and it literally felt like a bolt of lightning hit me right in the crown chakra, went right down my midline through my body. I mean, it literally felt like boom. I'm kind of like stunned. And the scientist in me was going, "What was that?" And the mystic in me was going, "Well, it was a sign. What do you think it was?" So I walk back in and I'm kind of stunned. And I look at the books on the table and all the books are on intuition, except one of them isn't on intuition. And it's on NLP. And I thought, okay, I cannot ignore this. So I bought the book and everything in my life changed.
Wow.
So, I'm sure that was not a random event.
No, I don't think it was. Art GISER is my guest. We're talking energetic NLP, and you're listening to Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and Art, I want to thank you so much, Art GISER, for being with us here on the program. This is fascinating, and I know we could go on longer, and I would love to have you back on the program to talk more about the work that you're doing and how you're helping people. Maybe get into some of the testimonials of how people have changed their lives through energetic NLP. And again, thank you for giving us so much time here on the program.
Well, I'm thrilled to be on your program. I think you're doing really important work, and I'd love to be back on. We could talk about that, or I could take people through some processes.
Let's plan that. I'll send some dates and so forth to you when I send you the podcasts, and we can do just that. But first, I have to let you folks know, thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story. New paradigms for a new world. We're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We are here on Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., and Wednesdays at 9 a.m., streaming at those times at richarddugan.com. Podcasts are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, whole bunch of other locations. And we're on YouTube where you can watch these interviews. I hope you will subscribe and maybe at least get notified so that when a new conversation is posted, boom, you've got it. We also ask that if you can support us financially, we would be so grateful. Our PayPal account is there for your security as well as ours. Put in Richard at richarddugan.com when they ask you for an email address to whom to send the contribution. And please, during the decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, spend some time in that quiet, peaceful, still, calm place, listening to that still, small voice. With all of that, I have 3 final questions. We'll need to go through them quickly, but we will have you back, I promise you. First of those 3 questions is, who is Art GISER?
It's a spirit in a body who's having fun, exploring what's possible.
What is your life's purpose?
That's something I think I grok more than understand, but on one level, I think it's to make things better and help people, but also to enjoy life. So I think those are 2 of my purposes.
And to that end, and I hope you get the movie reference, I asked this of all of my guests, do you get the movie reference? What was your best day?
I was going to say the day I met the love of my life. That would work.
Okay, very good. Art, we will have you back. Please, if I don't touch base with you in the next few days, please get a hold of me so we can set up another time, and we'll go through some of the steps as well as talk about some of the folks that you have helped or some of the issues that people have been able to get through to move on, to find their life's purpose, to live out the life that they want, to do the work, the kind of vocation that I got to tell you, I'm lucky. I'm very lucky. So thank you again for being with us.
Oh, my pleasure. And again, I so appreciate the work you're doing in the world, and keep it up.
Well, thank you. And I thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story. New paradigms for a new world. And until our next broadcast, podcast, video cast, love to Lal. Jeanette, I'm still listening. Dad, continue to be happy. I'm listening for you too. And to my best friend, Smokey, a.k.a. Doug Jones, I'll see you on the other side.